2 Samuel and chapter 9. 2 Samuel chapter 9. I'm going to read to you the whole chapter there. 2 Samuel chapter 9. If you have a Bible, please do follow me in my reading. If you're a Bible reader, this will be a familiar passage. This will be something that you've read and looked upon. Something that I've been wanting to preach on for some time. And I was reading a book recently that kind of dealt with this chapter, and I thought, here goes. That's the ticket for me to go. I love this chapter. Within it, again, as I've already said, there is so many things of sweetness and blessedness. And as Russell has prayed this morning, it is my prayer that this is not only the reading of the Word, but the Spirit of God upon it to apply it into our lives. Verse 1 of chapter 9. David said, "Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? And there was of the house of Saul a servant whose name was Ziba. And when they had called him unto David, the king said unto him, Art thou Ziba? And he said, Thy servant is he. The king said, Is there not yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said unto the king, Jonathan hath yet a son, which is lame on his feet. And the king said unto him, Where is he? Ziba said unto the king, Behold, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lo-Debar. Then King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, from Lo-Debar. Now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, was come unto David, he fell on his face and did reverence. And David said, Mephibosheth. And he had answered, Behold thy servant. David said unto him, Fear not, for I will surely show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake, and will restore thee all the land of Saul thy father. At my table continually. And he bowed himself and said, What is thy servant, that thou shouldst look upon such a dead dog as I am? Then the king called to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said unto him, I have given unto thy master's son all that pertained to Saul, and to all his house. Thou therefore, and thy sons and thy servants, shall till the land for him, and thou shalt bring in the fruits, that thy master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, thy master's son, shall eat bread always at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then said Ziba unto the king, According to all that my lord the king hath commanded his servant, so shall thy servant do. As for Mephibosheth, said the king, he shall eat at my table as one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son, whose name was Machir. And all that dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants unto Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat continually at the king's table, and was lame on both of his feet. Friends, this again is the reading of his word. From Lo-Debar to Jerusalem. From Lo-Debar to Jerusalem. Here, friends, we have an account of a man named Mephibosheth. I have practiced saying that all week. Mephibosheth. no doubt I will stumble. What do we know then about this man named Mephibosheth? What do we know about him? Again, if you are Bible readers, you will have stumbled over this story with great understanding and maybe of what is being said. What again, I ask, do we know about this man, Mephibosheth? Let's have a look at a few basic insights. We've read Mephibosheth was the firstborn of Jonathan, who of course, as you will know, was the son of King Saul. Therefore, making that Mephibosheth was the grandson of King Saul. We read in 2 Samuel 4 that Mephibosheth's nurse fled with him after the battle of Mount Gilboa, to which Saul and Samuel lost their lives. The nurse, maybe because of growing weary, dropped Mephibosheth. We remember that she dropped him, that being the reason why this man, or then being a child, was lame in both feet. We read in 2 Samuel 4 that Mephibosheth at this time was 5 years old. He was 5 years old. Again, we read and we learn in our reading of 2 Samuel 9 that Mephibosheth is still lame. He's still lame. Now for a man with his own son, making it reasonable to think that the account which we read was possibly in the middle or thereabouts of the reign of King David, which of course was in total was 40 years that King David reigned. We discover, don't we, that Mephibosheth dwelt in the house of Machir in a place called Lo-Debar. What of all this? It's interesting to know that the name Mephibosheth means shame. It means shame. And we look briefly at the place to where this man was now dwelling, remembering who he was, remembering the line to which he had come from. His grandfather, was King Saul, the first king of Israel. This account here in 2 Samuel 9 tells us where he dwelt. And this man Mephibosheth lived in a place called Lo-Debar. Lo-Debar, pronounce it how you will. A little town, historically. Little is known. But what is known, it was known to be a very inhospitable district, possibly east of the Jordan. It is suggested by historians that Lo-Debar was inhabited by many heathen. Yet some Israelites had settled there, certainly from the family of King Saul. Again, as we consider this dwelling place, the name Lo-Debar means this: without pasture. Without pasture. So Mephibosheth, a lame man, a man now dwelling in a place that has no real good report, maybe a forgotten man, maybe a man who was in a state of hopelessness. Though he had lineage, he had the claim of Saul. How we today claim on those who have gone before us. This man's grandfather was the Saul of the Bible. But he was the grandson of a failed king. A man who, being a cripple, particularly in the time to which we read, had very little or anything to offer. certainly to the kingdom of Israel. It might be fair to suggest that this man was left without hope, dwelling in a place where there was no pasture, amongst the heathen. So friends, that is an important backdrop to what we now read in 2 Samuel 9. Saints, listen to these words. David said, "Is there yet any left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Verse 3 says, "And the king said again, Is there not yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said unto the king, Jonathan hath a son, who is lame on both feet." Friends, what is the king doing here? What is happening? What is being done here? I would ask, is this just a random act? Is this the king sitting again on his balcony thinking, what do I do now? What do I do next? Is this just a random chapter in a random book? Or does this give us great insight to what was then to come? Is it a random act? Friends, we must conclude that it is not. We read in 1 Samuel 20, you remember the story. David and Jonathan wondering what to do. David wants to flee to Bethlehem. Saul is now becoming his enemy. And we read in verse 13 these words of 1 Samuel 20. "The Lord do so much more to Jonathan. But if it please my father to do thee evil, then I will show thee, and send thee away, that thou mayest go in peace, and the Lord be with thee, as thou hast been my father." Verse 14, friends. "And thou shalt not only, yet while I live, show me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not, but also that thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever." No, not when the Lord hath cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth. We read again in the same chapter, verse 42, this covenant that's going on now between David and Jonathan. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for as much as we have sworn, both of us, in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord be between me and thee, between my seed and thy seed, forever." And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. Friends, this is no random act by the king, but rather, this is King David fulfilling that which he had promised years ago. This is a king who is keeping to his word. This is a promise that King David made to Jonathan. That I will show kindness unto thy seed forever. Here we see the king's act of great benevolence. This king is a great king. Not only in wisdom, not only in war, not only in power, not only in justice, but also in showing loving kindness. The king, this king, King David, is a covenant-keeping king, who is true to his word, who has made a vow, a promise, and has sought out this man Mephibosheth to make it his known way that he ought and should show kindness to the house of Jonathan. So often, friends, we think God is a random God. But may it be known to you this morning that God is a covenant-keeping God. The more we learn that, the better we shall live. The more we learn that, the better we shall worship. The more we learn that, the better Christian we shall be. Friends, here we see the King in his great kindness. Verse 5 is of most interest. I was most tempted to stay on this verse for some time. I want to read it to you. Verse 5 of 2 Samuel 9 says this, continuing in the story. We know that Mephibosheth now is being known to David. David is now aware that there is somebody left in the house of Saul that he can show this loving kindness to. Then listen to this. Verse 5. King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Michal and the son of Amiel from Lo-Debar. You might say, so what? You might say, that's very basic. Friends, I want to say it's profound. Yeah. I want to say that it is the height of grace. This is an act of mercy. This was an act of grace. King David sought out the poor, lame man. Mephibosheth could not come on his own accord. He had no right, friends. He had no claim. And note this, he was not able, for he was lame in his feet. Yet the King of Jerusalem, King David, made sure that this lame man was brought into his presence. I wonder what you're hearing this morning. I wonder what your hearts and your minds are thinking. He had no right. Mephibosheth there in Lo-Debar, the place without pasture. David hears of him and he says, I will not only ask of him, I will not only but I shall go and fetch him myself. Amen. Brethren, sisters, this morning, my prayer is that you have ears to hear. By grace alone. Again, could we not stay there for some time? By grace alone is our next subject on our Friday evenings. But within that text, friends, for me, is the sweetest, most precious thing. There he is in Lo-Debar, and the King of Jerusalem, the most influential place on the planet at the time, said, I will get this man. I will initiate. I will do. And what do we see, friends? As we read on, what do we see? How did this poor lady grandson of King Saul? It is now time that I had such honour. It is now time that I am raised to the king's table. It is about time that I ate the bread of the king. That is what I deserve. Oh no, friends. We don't hear that, do we? Quite the opposite. Verse 6 says this. When Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, was come unto David, he fell on his face and did reverence. And David said, Mephibosheth, and he answered, Behold thy servant. Again, we read in verse 8, he bowed himself and said, What is thy servant that thou should look upon such a dead dog as I have? Brethren, do I need to comment? Is there much that I can say to add to this profundity? poor man? No. No pride. Not I deserve this. But he counted himself as a poor dog and a servant of David. Is it not clear to see the response of such an unworthy beneficiary? The lame and hopeless man has now been offered grace. This lame man has been called by the great king. What is his response? My friends, his response is most clear. His response was reverence. His response was a humbled heart, an acknowledgement of who he is before a gracious king who is lavishing his goodness onto a lame and a poor and a hopeless man. I say again, friends, to provoke your heart, to provoke that mind within your head this morning. Oh, today, that you would have ears to hear. This, my friends, is a response of one grace. This is a man who knows that he stands before a king who can do anything he wants. It is being lavished. Or what is being lavished is such goodness, such mercy. You remember Lo-Debar? As I've repeated, I know. The place where Mephibosheth dwelt. And in a hospitable land. A land without pasture. Are these there in the Bible just for our knowledge? Friends, let us not think so. But look now. Look now. Look now where he has come from. From a place called Lo-Debar. David says in verse 7, David said unto him, fear not. Two great words. Fear not. For I will surely show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake, and will restore thee all the land of Saul thy father, and thou shalt eat bread at my table continually. Verse 11 says, Ziba unto the king, said unto the king, according to all that the Lord king hath commanded his servant, so shall thy servant do. And listen to this, friends. Listen to this. As for Mephibosheth, said the king, he shall eat at my table as one of the king's sons. In the years past, haven't we, we've been speaking words of things like reconciliation, redemption. Friends, we see it here. We see it in action. That this poor lame man, let me say it like this sinner, this great sinner, now has been put and been given all the things that the king would have him to have. This is sonship. This is from darkness to light. And this, my friends, is continual. This is our place for the God of heaven. Verse 13 says, Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat continually at the king's table. How many times does this short chapter tell us that this man Mephibosheth is going to be at the king's table? Not as a servant. In fact, he's going to be given servants. He's going to be given people to come and till his land that he has been given. No, not as a servant, friends. But as a son. As a son. From nothing to everything. From hopelessness to certainty. From orphan to sonship. From the wilderness to the land of milk and honey. From death unto life. Friends, this morning, what have you heard? What have you heard? Is this just an informative story about a lame man named Mephibosheth? You say yes, maybe. I'll say to you again, friends, what have you heard? What do you hear today? I pray you hear. That is our constant prayer, is it not? That we hear. But what we hear within the great account of Mephibosheth's journey from Lo-Debar to Jerusalem, what we see, what we read, is a story of redemption. What we see is a lame man who was hopeless, now sitting and eating the bread of the king's table. Now maybe, friends, maybe that it is to you a cold and a dry and historical story. But I want to say to you this morning, this is the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. What we see here, friends, is the grace of God towards sinners. What we see here is the benevolence, the goodness of God towards dead dogs like you and I. This morning, friends, we are Mephibosheths. We are Mephibosheths. The Apostle Paul sums it up, doesn't he? Ephesians 2. That at one time, you were without Christ. Let me say this to you, friends. No one is born a saint. There might be people, even in this very room this morning, because you were brought up in a Christian family, that tells you you're a Christian. Do not be mistaken. The Lord no doubt has used it. But you came out of your mother's womb a sinner. That's how you were born, of Adam. Unregenerate. Preferred darkness rather than light. Sin was your comfort. Sin was your pursuit. Sin was your pleasure. Sin was your joy. But at times, one time, you were without Christ. Sometimes it's good to reflect on that time, isn't it? Being aliens from the Commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenant of promise, having no hope, and without God in the world. Of course, Paul is in one way here referring to the Gentiles. We've now been brought in. But now we have hope. Verse 13 says this, but now in Christ Jesus, you who were sometimes afar off are made nigh. How, friends? How? By the blood. By the blood of the Christ. Have you yet come, friends? Have you yet come? Have you yet looked upon him? Have you yet believed? Have you yet seen the servant of the King coming to fetch you? Has the Spirit come and quickened you and made you alive? Has he? Has that servant come? You remember verse 5, friends, don't you? David sent his servant. Has the Spirit quickened you? Has he caused your dull heart to now believe? Do you still dwell at Lo-Debar? Do you still live among the heathens? Or have you made your way unto the promised city of Jerusalem? We speak this morning, or we've read of a great King David. But friends, this is only a shadow. This is only a picture of a coming king, the one to whom we give the name King of Kings, the one who reigns, the one who is and was and is to come, the one who is the Alpha and the Omega, the one who is the author and finisher of our faith. This is the King this morning to whom we speak, Jesus Christ the righteous. Have you yet seen him? Time is short, friends. Time is short. Have we not yet learned that? How presumptuous we can be. How quick we can be to think of those things that give us worldly pleasure. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face. Friends, then and only then will the things of the earth grow strangely dim. Only then. One of the greatest problems in church today is that we presume that we are saved. And there are many who will go into churches just like this today, and in the deepness and the depths of their heart, they still want to dwell in Lo-Debar. They're happy amongst the heathens. They're happy in their sin. You know why? It's been said many times from here. Why? Because sin is pleasurable. If sin were not pleasurable, it would not be such a problem, would it? Where do you dwell, friends? You may say, here's that question again. Indeed it is. Where do thy dwell? Call is there, is it not? Matthew 11. Come unto me. Come unto me. These are the words of the King of Kings. All ye that labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Friends, are you tired of sin? Are you weary? Are you groaning by what you are by nature? I'll ask again, as you yet called upon him. Jesus says, take my yoke upon me, learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. Friends, there's no rest outside of Christ. Zero, nada, zilch, nothing, no hope. Verse 30 says, my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Two types of people in this world. I finish with this before we partake in the Lord's Supper. Two types of people. Those who are saved and those who are not. Those who are born of his Spirit and those who have not. Those of Adam or those of Christ. My friends, today, if you be in Christ Jesus, today you ought to rejoice.